The way the definition reads is, this is what you guys would all be used to looking at like a parabola, right? The little curve opening up or down. The vertex would have been the one point we found before, which again, in this case would be the minimum, but if it was flipped, like if it was y equals negative x squared graph, flipping so it's opening down, the vertex would be the maximum. Okay, now for it to fit within the realm of what we're doing, because all the other conics are going to kind of build off this. Now you'll have to locate a point called the focus point, and then a line called the directrix. In terms of a parabola, the focus is always going to be inside the parabola. So if it's opening up, it will be inside it, like above the vertex. If it was opening down, it'd be below the vertex. And the directrix is always going to be on the outside of the parabola. So again, if it's opening this way, it's going to be below it. If it's opening the other way, it'll be above it. The definition reads that if I pick any point on this parabola at all, like if I pick the point up here, down here, or over here, if I drew a line from this point down to the focus, and then here to the directrix, it should be even. So it should be the same distance. Pulling out the points it says and writing the equations of the lines it says. And the only lines associated with the parabola here would be an axis of symmetry, which goes through the vertex, and then directrix, which is either going to sit above or below the vertex. Probably what I would do, sometimes this helps. Like I know in my head I do this. Like the first thing I would see is if it opens up or down, because that tells me whether or not I'm going to add or subtract the value that I get for P. Since this is positives on both sides, if it's positive on both sides, that means that my parabola is going to look something like that. It's going to open up. Okay, which again is telling me that like if I can get my vertex point, I know my focus point has to sit above it. So to get my focus point, I'm going to be adding P to my y coordinate because it's going up and down. So to move it up and down, you add things to y's. The other thing to note is since there's nothing written on the outside of the x there, you got to remember that's 1 out there. So that you pull out the correct value for P. All right, so vertex should be the most straightforward one. And your vertex in this case, I guess equals makes sense, would be I've got something with the x, so I've got something added or subtracted to x, so I need a number other than 0 here. There's nothing added or subtracted to y, so I can put a 0 right there. And I can do this already because it's already in standard form, so there's nothing for me to alter. Your standard equation goes x minus h. So if I see x minus a number, remember if it's in parentheses and you're pulling it out, it's always kind of like a reverse kind of thing. So that would be my actual vertex. So I know like this point right here, if I graphed it, would be at 2, 0.
Why did you put 0 for the k down?
Because there's nothing added or subtracted from the y. Like this is essentially y plus 0, or y minus 0, or however. Okay. Yeah.
I'm really confused on how that's standard form.
That's what it is. What did I have for standard form? X minus h.
Yeah. Not equals 4p y minus k. I got that. That equation looks nothing like that.
Same thing.
Oh, it's backwards.
Yeah.
Oh.
You're allowed to do that with
Okay,
equations.
that makes sense. Makes more sense. Thanks. Alright.
I guess I should have put the 1 over there, but whatever.
Oh, see? I was the only one confused. Mom
That's
just
all right.
laughed at me.
Glad you're at it. Okay, so for everything else, well, except for, like, once you get the vertex, I can also write the axis of symmetry. All right, guys, your axis of symmetry was the line that goes through this way. So since it's a parabola opening up, this should always be x equals whatever the heck the x coordinate is, which is 2. So these two you can usually get right from the beginning as soon as you get it into standard form. All right, the other two things I want you to write, focus and directrix, are coming from the p-value. So since this is like 1, y minus 0, that means 4p equals 1, because this number out in front is p. So p is 1/4. Okay? So now it's just a matter of remembering if you add it or subtract it from the vertex to get the focus. And I said, like, your focus point is always on the inside of where the parabola is drawn. So since my parabola was opening up, I'm going to add that number to my vertex to get the focus point. And again, it's sliding up and down, so you're only changing the y coordinate because it's sliding up and down. So that means my focus point would be 2. That's not changing because this doesn't alter things up and down. And then 1/4. This is 0 plus 1/4. Okay? And then the directrix always sits the opposite direction of the focus point. So like this would be below the vertex. So like my directrix would be right there. So to get that, I'm basically taking the y coordinate for that vertex and subtracting p from it now. So the directrix should be like y, it's 0. Like this is the y coordinate for the vertex minus p. So y equals, so that would be an answer that you need. That would be one answer there and there. So that'd be the 4 things. It's not asking you to graph it, it's just saying pull those things out. Eventually you'll have to like graph these things and all that stuff would have to be on there. Since I want this in standard form, I'm going to try and see if I can simply isolate the squared coordinate. Because if I can just isolate the squared, it makes life much easier. The only time I wouldn't be able to do this quickly, like isolating it, is if I also had another, like if I had plus 2x or something in there. Then at that point you would have to go about completing the square. But I think for the most part you don't have anything like that today. I don't want to say positively, but I'm pretty sure I cut all that out today. That's for like a later date. Okay? Like you should not have to do completing the square today. Okay? All right. Now, like in terms of isolate, when I mean isolate x squared, I mean try and get it as simply x squared by itself. So since it says 2x squared, I would divide everything by 2. Okay? And then to get it finally into like your standard form, remember I want it as something written as parentheses with y added or subtracted from something by itself. Okay? The x squared is fine as it is. So for me to get y by itself, I have to distribute out whatever's in front of it, which is a negative 12. Correct? Right? So if I distribute out the negative 12, that would become negative 12 divided by negative 12, which is 1. This one would be negative 1/2 now, because 6 divided by negative 12 is negative 1/2. This would now be in standard form, so I could go through now and pull out h's, k's, p's, and all that other stuff. Again, I know that this right here, that whole negative 12 represents 4p. So for me to use p to get anything, I have to set up like that. So negative 3. Okay. So again, like this, I'm going to start with the vertex again. So this is technically, right, x minus 0 squared. So that means my h is 0 because there's nothing added or subtracted to it. So my vertex has an x coordinate of 0. This is my y minus k. So since it's subtracted, that means my k is 1/2. Just always think, remember, it's opposite signs. If you get it in standard form, it's always opposite signs when you pull the numbers out.
So Then I'm just going to, why is it positive 1/2?
Because the standard form has a minus in it. So if this has a minus in it, it keeps
Oh,
it
okay.
positive.
All right, I get it.
Okay, also, if you've got the vertex, that means you have the axis of symmetry. The axis of symmetry is always whatever the x coordinate is in this case. So x equals 0. Or x equals 0 is the y-axis. So if you put the y-axis, it's the same thing. All right, so you can say or y-axis. Okay. Since this is a negative value, right, this number here, if that's negative, the p-value is negative, that means it should be opening that way. So in terms of my vertex is there. That means that my focus point now is sitting below it. So to get my focus, I'm going to be subtracting p, and my directrix would be up here, so I'm going to add p to get that one. So the opening up or down tells you whether or not really you should add or subtract. And again, the focus and stuff, the only thing that's changing since it's going up and down is your y-coordinate. So my 0 is still there for the focus. This will become 1/2 minus p. So it's minus -3, correct?
Oh, wait.
So if I minus a negative, that becomes 1. I'll go with that. Did I do that right? Did I screw anything up?
Yeah. The focus is K plus P.
Yeah?
Not K minus P.
Ah, okay.
I was gonna say that.
Okay, yeah.
All right. And then your directrix.
Your directrix, that's the K minus P.
Ah.
There you go.
That's the. No, maybe.
You're just a mess today.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, I
He's
know.
testing you. Insane.
So this would be the k was what? 1/2. Choose. What's 1/2 plus 3?
3.5.
Fine. That's okay. If you alter it so now that you've got your y squared, it's opening left or right. Okay? The way you work with this stuff, pretty much the same, except for when you do things like finding your directrix, or you're finding the focus, you just reverse the coordinate you were working with. Like on the first ones, for our focus, we only added or subtracted stuff from the y because it was moving vertically. If I turn it so now my parabola is going left or right, now I've got to alter the x coordinate. So to get your focus, you're either going to add or subtract that p-value from your x coordinate, and then the directrix, now you'd be working with the y coordinate. So again, this is basically the same thing we just did for the last two. The only difference is now y squared as opposed to x, which means that for this one, it should be opening that direction. Like that's going to be my vertex, my focus point's in there, and my directrix will be that way. Okay? And your axis of symmetry would be there. Well, right? Again, I only know that because both sides, like whatever's in front of the y is positive and whatever in front of the x is positive. So that means they're both going to be the same, so they're opening to the right. Just like the last one, since there isn't another term with, like there isn't another y term here, my y squared is isolated, and that's a good thing. I want it that way. So again, this is basically like me saying y minus 0 squared in terms of you pulling out coordinates. The other thing I want as parentheses x plus something. So that means whatever's in front of x, you got to distribute out, which is 8. What's 48 divided by 8? 6. There. So this is my x minus -6. All right, and again, this part right there is your 4p. So that means that I can get my p-value by dividing by 4. What's that? 2. All right, so my vertex here should be -6, 0. Is that all right? Okay.
Why is it still -6?
Because it still should be set up as x minus h.
Oh,
So to make that a positive, 6 can be negative.
got it.
Okay? Axis of symmetry now, since it's going horizontally, this should be your y equals whatever the heck the y coordinate is. Okay, so y equals 0. Gosh. All right. Your focus point, now again, since it's opening left or right, your focus point's moving horizontally, so that means that you're adding or subtracting things to your x-coordinate. So my focus point should be -6 plus 2, right? That's my p-value. So that is -4, 0. So there's my f. And then the directrix, again, that is basically the opposite direction from your vertex. Directrix is vertical, so it needs to be x equals. And in this case, it's going to be -8, because it'll be your x-coordinate minus p. So this is still the x-coordinate. So there. Here's the thing with problems like this, where you're writing the equation of a parabola. That means that I need to figure out if I'm going to square the x term or y term. I got to figure out how big the p-value is. And then since the vertex is 0, 0, it makes life a little easier in terms of writing, because your h and k are both 0, so they don't really technically have to be in the equation. So it's either going to look like...
But now we're just please that Jade work for the student hub for just a moment, please. She'll be right back. Jade to the hub, please.
Okay? It's going to be one of those two forms. Right? So basically, if I find out what the p-value is, I should be able to fill in p to one of those two. Okay? And the easy way to figure out p-values, guys, especially if they give you a focus point, is remember, guys, the p that you need to find is just how far away the focus and the vertex are from each other. Meaning that if I stack these, does this coordinate change at all? No. So since my y-coordinate is not changing, does that apply more to something that's x squared or y squared? Basically, go back and look and compare.
Y squared.
Yeah, so what you want to do is, since that's my vertex, I want to find the focus that said like h plus p, comma k. You said that applied to the y squared one? Yeah. Okay, so the one that matches up to this, again, because if I've got both of these, just stack them and realize that, hey, the y-coordinate does not change. Y-coordinates never change between those two if it's a y-squared kind of graph. So that means that that's gone. I don't care about that. So we know it's y-squared or px. And again, however far apart the other coordinate is, like from 0 to 5 is an addition of 5, correct? That's what your p is. It's 5. So when I actually write my equation, this is becoming y squared equals 4 times 5x. So what's 4 times 5?